with us is LaTosha Brown, the co-founder of Black Voters Matter. The website is blackvotersmatterfund.org, F-U-N-D, and MS LaTosha, L-A-T-O-S-H-A Brown is her Twitter handle. LaTosha, welcome back to the program. It's been a couple of years since you were on. It's so nice to have you back with us. I'm curious, thank you. I'm curious your thoughts on the vice presidential debate and the state of the race right now.
You know, so much to talk about. I'll say that I think there weren't any major surprises to me on the vice president debate, other than the fact that I did not know that J.D. Vance was such a good storyteller,
Yeah.
as my grandma would say. That I deemed I called it the coach and the chameleon, because what was interesting to me is that, I think that in some ways it was good to see the civility in the way that they treated each other. But I think the part that was so disrespectful is just the blatant lies and the fact that, and I was really disappointed that the media, that the anchors could not challenge some of the fact checking and insight. So that was really strange. J.D. Vance specifically has called for the ban on abortion. So to say that he is not and never, that was very deeply concerning.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately my thoughts around it, I think it was clear, the contrast was clear. Although I think the temperament, it was interesting because in some ways I felt like the temperament and the tone was very civil from both candidates. And I think both of them did well in terms of at least their presentation. But the challenge for me is that truth matters. And so in this country, we have to really recognize that the truth matters. And so it was very disconcerting, concerning to me around how I felt that Senator Vance framed issues one way, where the policies that he supports says something completely different. Right. I don't know whether he had a change of heart or what happened, but that was a little disappointing. So he's just
a very facile liar. I mean, I'll just say it.
I tried to say it the nice way, because my grandmother would not let us say lie when we were growing up. Yeah. But he is like a fabulous liar. And it's interesting because I finally figured out, I could not understand how he became Trump's running mate. I get it now. Like he's actually a better liar. He's a much more skillful liar, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think George Santos is kind of the totem for the Republican Party. I mean, he was a little too much of a fabulist for them ultimately, but holy cow, truth does not matter. You've noted in the past that Tim Walz, in particular, has obviously Kamala Harris has deep roots in the black community, having gone to a historically black college and et cetera, just growing up, and her father was black and everything else. But Tim Walz actually has quite a history here with the African American Family Preservation Act, the Crown Act, the key police reforms after the George Floyd killing. Can you tell us about that?
I think what's really interesting is that part of, if you look at the history of Tim Walz, he has a very strong record of seeing and serving all of us. And so I think that that's really remarkable. What we know, is that he has, in his policies, he has stood with everyday people. And I think he's created even policies, even in the state, when we look at what he did with free lunch, what he did with education, what he did with standing, even the very thing that he was criticized around was that when the George Floyd protesters, that there were some that wanted for violence to be inflicted upon them. And in fact, I think there's a way that he leads. I think the part that impresses me most about him is that he leads with his humanity. And so there's a number of things that he's done that I think, as you've mentioned, that really show kind of his character and his integrity, that ultimately he believes that he is to govern, that he is a steward of resources, and he is to govern in such a way that all people are recognized and respected. And so I think that's why even in the state he was able to win the gubernatorial election and even serve in Congress, because he's a candidate that is a really interesting candidate. That he moderate Republicans. He has had an appeal with them, rural farmers, Black activists. Like, he has a number. What I really appreciate and value about him is he really has walked the walk around how do you create policy that actually unifies communities and not divides them. I think what's very impressive to me is that he has been consistent in those spaces of literally being inclusive through policy and aligning himself with issues that I think that he recognizes it's not just one group of people that this helps, that when we literally help groups particularly are marginalized, that what we do is we lift up the votes for all people. And so that's what's most impressive about him for me.
Yeah, it's and he's been doing it not just as governor, but also as a member of Congress before that. I mean, this is apparently his life's work. I'm curious, as the co-founder of Black Voters Matter and the Black Voters Matter Fund.org, your thoughts on that particular block, that vote. You know, about 12% of our population, I believe, are Black people. I'm not sure exactly the percentage of voters who are Black, but and I realize there's enormous diversity within the African American community. But you know, where are we at right now? I've had a number of callers, particularly Black callers, call in and say that they're really concerned about Black men who seem to be deserting the Democratic Party and going for Trump, either because they're you know, they don't want a woman as president, or because they think that, you know, Trump represents strength, and that's an important value. And it became quite a conversation, actually, among a number of Black callers into this program over the last couple of days. I'm curious your thoughts on all that.
You know, we have people on the ground. We're working in 12 states, and so you know, let me say this, because I want to dispel some pieces of this. You know, as a voting bloc, there is no other constituency group in the country that votes at a higher percentage as a group vote than Black voters, not just Black female voters, but Black male voters. And so when you look at the numbers of Black women that vote for the Democratic ticket, it is the highest constituency in the country, only second to Black men. And so I'm saying that because I think that there's also a particular kind of standard, a double standard, that is placed on the African American community, that in some ways, that if all of us are not voting a certain kind of way, then that means something. Now, white people, you know, the white voters, Latino voters, other voters, there's always going to be a segment of the population that may have different political ideologies, may have particular different beliefs, but overwhelmingly, the voters that I have been talking to are still aligned with the bloc, that they see, yes, and I don't see the evidence where I've seen this major exodus. Has there been, I think as the electorate has grown, what you've seen is you've actually seen a point here, 2 points there, but we heard the same thing happening in Georgia. In Georgia, there was supposed to be this big exodus in the Warnock, in the U.S. Senate race, which was Herschel Walker and Warnock, and every single, I cannot tell you how many interviews I did to actually try to address this thing of this flocking of Black men to Herschel Walker. The truth of the matter is, Tom, it did not happen. You know, that those numbers did not. The numbers did not happen. So I do think that in this election cycle, that yes, should we be concerned? That I think, and I think that there's a way that we conflate this idea of people being disgruntled with the process, that in some ways that that the threat is they're going to go vote for the other side. If anything, the biggest threat to me is for voters to not feel, not see themselves or see their power in that vote, and to not come out and vote. I think that's a larger threat than this. I think some of this idea of this huge flood to Trump, I just don't see the evidence of it. Yeah. Are there people that are going to vote for him? Yes, I'm quite sure. Yes. Sure. He will get the regular, I think the same 10, 12 that we always see fluctuate over the years. Does that mean, though? I think what's important, and I think that your callers are zoned in on this, and I think they're absolutely right. Does that mean that there is an element of frustration in our community? I think with Black men, absolutely. That there is a concern in our communities that part of the we want what everybody else wants. We don't want to just participate in an election cycle. We want to make sure that our participation leads to us having power and to policy change. Yep. And so there are young men that I talk to every day that are deeply concerned about criminal justice reform. They're deeply concerned about economic security, that what we know is after COVID, many people don't feel as economically safe as they did pre-COVID. That their jobs, that many of them, it's as if COVID created this space for people to really recognize how economically vulnerable this nation is, how economically vulnerable they and their families are. And so I think there's real core issues that the campaign should be seeking to actually talk and align themselves with align themselves with understanding who the candidates are and where there's a distinction. Because while there's one issue around strength, where was Donald Trump and that strength, where he was trying to use that strength around the 5 Black men that he wanted that were exonerated, that he literally was pushing for the extreme of the law, that knowing that it was a lie, right? That when we're looking at him aligning himself with white nationalist groups, that for him to align that in COVID, that many of the people disproportionately, folks who died in COVID because his failure of handling it correctly, were African-American people. And we have not forgotten that. We have not forgotten the calls to Georgia to say, let me find 11,000 votes, or the whistle calls that says that when you have a racist, you've got a racist rally happening by in Virginia, and he's saying that they're fine people on both sides. We are not stupid. In some ways, I think that Black voters are some of the most sophisticated voters. Now, is there that concern? Yes.
I agree.
Right?
That's my sense of it from my Black callers as well. LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. It's blackvotersmatterfund.org is the website. LaTosha, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure.